My children are going through a lonely school life with almost no close friends. Up until 4th grade, everything seemed fine. But around 5th grade, they began to struggle with friendships. By 6th and 7th grade, the loneliness had become much more visible. I sometimes wish my children were lively, popular, and able to lead the atmosphere. But they're not. Other kids don't really want to play with them. On field trips, while groups of children laugh and chat together, my child stands on the outside. Watching that scene from a distance when I drop them off or pick them up breaks my heart. In truth, I was similar as a child. All through elementary school, I had few friends. I only interacted cautiously with 1 or 2 nearby classmates. I was never part of the popular group and was rarely invited to play. I too had a lonely, slightly isolated school life. Perhaps that's why when I see my children's struggles, I think, maybe they've inherited this from me, and I feel guilty. I know in my head that these experiences will eventually become a kind of medicine for them, but my heart resists. When I think about my child feeling lonely or treated unfairly at school, I feel furious and helpless as a parent. Sometimes, even though it's not my child's fault, I catch myself thinking they seem less than, or when my child made a mistake, I feel tempted to blame another kid instead. There are days when one happy remark from my child fills me with joy, making me think I couldn't ask for more. But on days when they talk about their struggles with friends, I feel utterly powerless as a mother and want to give up. At times, I even feel like I'm suffering more than they are. I know I should empathize and comfort them without exceeding their pain, but that's not always easy. Still, I sincerely hope every emotion and experience they're having in their relationships will eventually become something good. These are lessons I cannot give them directly. They're life's own teachings. Raising children has taught me not everything can be solved just because I try hard. I can't fix or elevate every aspect of their lives. So each day, I'm learning how to find balance between my child's growth and my own heart.
Today, we're opening up a really powerful reflection we received. It's from a parent, and it goes way beyond the usual worries about school. It gets right into the incredibly tough personal struggle of watching your child feel lonely, really socially isolated at school.
Yeah.
So our goal here is to take this really honest, raw account and see what wider insights we can find. We'll look at the guilt parents feel, that awful conflict between, what your head tells you and what your heart feels.
Yeah.
And eventually how this parent describes getting to a place of acceptance. It's really about facing the limits of what love alone can actually, fix.
And what strikes you immediately reading this is just how honest it is. That's quite rare, actually. It captures that exact moment, doesn't it? When childhood shifts. The social part stops being simple play and becomes, much more complex, almost hierarchical. And when a child struggles there, the parent feels it so intensely, partly because, you realize how little control you have.
Okay, let's dig into the timeline here, because the letter lays it out, and I think it tells us something important about those middle school years.
Yeah, the ages are key.
The parent says both her kids seemed pretty okay socially through elementary school, up to about the end of 4th grade.
That sounds about right. A common pattern.
But then, she says, it just stopped. 5th grade, the problem started. And by 6th and 7th grade, the loneliness was constant. School became really, really hard for them.
And that age range, 5th to 7th grade, it's just a notoriously tricky time developmentally. Social groups get intense, loyalty shifts, status suddenly feels very fixed, very unforgiving.
Yeah.
And the mother, she admits she had this picture in her head, didn't she? She hoped her kids would be the active, popular, bright kids who lead the atmosphere.
Right, that ideal.
Exactly. And when that ideal collides head-on with the reality of her kids struggling, that sparks a kind of grief in the parent. You're almost mourning the life you imagined for them, maybe even more than the one they're actually living right now.
And that grief, it gets fed by these really specific painful images. She talks about how hard it is to actually see those moments of exclusion. See her child floating around lonely or, clearly ostracized. She mentions seeing groups of kids laughing together on a field trip or in the hallway, and her child is just outside, not just alone, but visibly outside that circle. Witnessing that, knowing you can't just step in, that's going to be incredibly sharp pain for a parent.
It really is. It's like a fundamental disconnect, isn't it, between the unconditional love you feel and the world's very conditional acceptance of your child. But it gets even deeper, I think, when the parent starts to turn that pain inward, which this letter really shows.
Yes, this is where it gets really crucial, I think, because her reflection shifts completely. She starts talking about her own past. She writes about having an almost identical school life, lonely through elementary school. She says she was small, only really talked to a couple of kids right near her desk.
Cautious.
Yeah, cautious, never part of the big popular groups, never really invited.
And this is where, maybe we need to pause for a second, because she asks that devastating question. I wonder if they inherited this from their mother.
Right.
And while it's so natural to see those parallels, the real danger is that guilt, that feeling of, did I pass this on? It's this profound sense of failure, almost like you've given them a burden, not just a personality trait. It can be paralyzing for a parent.
And that history, her own experience, it doesn't just make the current situation feel worse. It makes it almost impossible to parent objectively, doesn't it? She says because she lived through it, she struggles to separate her own old feelings, that shame, that inadequacy, from what her child is actually going through now. It's less like empathy and more like being re-traumatized herself.
Precisely. That's the echo chamber she's describing. And it fuels that internal conflict mentioned in the letter. Her mind gets it, Rationally, she understands this struggle could eventually be medicine, something that builds character.
The long view.
Yeah, the long view. But her heart, driven by that fierce protective instinct, and maybe her own past pain, just finds accepting it impossible.
Yeah.
The head wants to teach resilience. The heart just wants to swoop in and rescue.
And that battle inside, it comes out as, well, volatility. The letter details some really raw emotions, wanting to lash out, needing someone else to blame, this intense feeling of indignation, like, this isn't fair to my child.
Totally understandable reactions.
He even admits that sometimes, even if her child clearly made a mistake socially, she felt this huge urge to blame another kid instead. Anything to avoid that feeling of her child being the one who's lacking.
Yeah, just shifting the blame to ease that immediate sting, and the sheer emotional energy it takes to ride that wave. It's exhausting. The letter really highlights these incredibly fast mood swings.
Right.
One tiny positive interaction from the child, and suddenly she feels immense relief, like couldn't ask for more.
Back from the brink.
Totally. But then, the moment another relationship issue comes up, bam, she's right back down, feeling powerless and desperate, sometimes just totally flat, listless. She's bouncing between these extremes constantly.
And that volatility, it leads straight to this really interesting idea she has for kind of measuring the pain. We could maybe call it the 100% rule.
Okay, yeah. Tell me more.
She sort of realizes, logically, that if her child is struggling at a level of, say, 100, her job is to empathize and comfort up to that 100 mark.
Match the need.
Exactly. But she admits that sometimes her pain, her reaction, goes way past that. It hits 120, maybe 150. And when her response is bigger than the child's actual difficulty, she can't give that measured comfort. True empathy becomes impossible.
That's such a critical insight, that excess reaction. That's the signal, isn't it? It means the parent isn't just responding to the child's current pain anymore.
Right.
They're responding to their own story, maybe their own perceived failure as a parent. The pain isn't purely sympathetic then, it's tangled up with the parent's own stuff. And realizing you might be hurting more than the person actually going through it, that's what forces that difficult, necessary step back.
And their realization, recognizing that imbalance, that seems to be the turning point. It's painful, but it's where the growth happens, not just for the child, but for her, the parent.
Yes.
The wisdom she eventually finds seems rooted in finally accepting her own powerlessness in a way.
Yeah.
She learns, she says, that some things just can't be fixed simply by my doing well, by her trying harder or trying to pull them up past a certain level. That's the big shift, isn't it? From trying to control everything to respecting the child's own journey.
It's the ultimate letting go in some ways. She has to trust that this difficult experience the child is navigating, the loneliness, the figuring things out, developing coping skills, that this will genuinely become good medicine, important life study.
Stuff she can't teach them.
Exactly. Stuff she can't teach, can't provide, and crucially can't shield them from forever. Because if she keeps jumping in past that 100% mark, trying to fix it all, she actually stops the medicine from working. She prevents the learning.
So the ongoing work isn't about making the loneliness disappear entirely. It's about managing her own reaction to it. Her task, as she describes it towards the end, becomes learning how to balance between my child's growth and my own heart. accepting she can walk alongside them, offer support, but she can't walk in front of the struggle for them.
And finding that balance, knowing when to trust the process, even when it hurts to watch, versus knowing when intervention is needed, that's the hardest, most continuous lesson of this whole experience, I think. The child's growth is sometimes directly tied to the parent's ability to tolerate their own discomfort.
That's a really powerful way to put it. A necessary one, too.
Yeah.
I think what today's letter ultimately shows us is that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is actually step back. Allow the struggle, allow the pain, because that's where real necessary growth happens. Growth you just can't teach any other way, even when watching it feels like torture.
Right. And that leaves us, and maybe you listening, with a really vital question to think about. If we accept that kids do need to navigate their own social path, and that some isolation might even be formative, like medicine, well, how do you actually tell the difference?
Yep.
How do you distinguish between that necessary character-building struggle and the kind of struggle that's actually damaging and does require you to step in? Where does a parent draw the line for their own emotional involvement so they don't accidentally get in the way of that essential life study their child has to undertake?
That's definitely something to mull over. Thank you for joining us for this really quite intense exploration today.
It was important. Thanks for having me.